directly from Pretoria in South Africa, and I'm talking about Steve Epps. Mr. Epps is with us. He is a professional engineer with more than 30 years experience with digital technology and innovation. He's currently the chief advisor to the Ultrasafe Nuclear company for researching, designing, and implementing all the digital technology for designing, building, and running a fleet of micro-modular nuclear reactors. In his previous role, he was both a CTO and Chief Digital Transformation Officer for YA Enterprises for Southern Africa, where he worked extensively on smart cities, smart grids, and Internet of Things. Steve, what a pleasure to have you directly from Pretoria to our global audience, sharing your experiences with digital transformation, especially in this as part of the industry, the energy industry that is going through a tremendous transition. And then you layer digital transformations on top of that. Very, very eager and to hear what your experiences have been in this journey. And again, thank you for sharing with our global audience.
Thank you. Okay. So, hello everybody. I'm pleased to be here, and I'm here to talk about the digital workforce return on investment with the perspective of how we've approached it within our industry and my previous experience. So, you know, we always start off with what our experience is and what our careers are and how we've progressed. And I've always found it very difficult to explain where I've been and what I've done and what my experience is across the years. So I put together this kind of framework with all the experience, exposure, industries, and knowledge I've gained over the time. So I've been an executive for quite a long time, and if you saw my titles earlier, a European professional engineer and chartered engineer, as well as working with Huawei quite extensively on smart cities and research. But we're here to talk about Ultrasafe Nuclear Company, USNC. So this is with generation 4 nuclear reactors. It's a whole new technology that's coming about. And this is a really innovative approach to the reactors. So the ones that the company are building are sized 15 megawatts. So they're nice and small. They're there to work in remote locations or to power businesses or to provide smaller solutions wherever you require it. It's designed so that the reactor itself is very much a standalone component. And I've shown the lorries there. It's like, what have the lorries got to do with the reactor? It's a case of these things are modular because we can just drive in, and it's built on these these containers. You just drive it in and put it together, and within 6 weeks you can build the entire site. It's just 20 meters underground. You put it in there on the back of a lorry. It's taken in there. You put it in there, and off you go. It doesn't need refueling, so for 20 years it can run. It's like a big battery for 20 years, and everything's enclosed, so there's no radiation, no nothing. You can just stay close to it and work with it. So it needs very little monitoring or maintaining. It's incredibly safe, and the physics are such that it's been proven over the last 40 years that it's impossible for it to overheat. It's got, by the laws of physics, a self-regulating that it cools down. So therefore, we get the approvals of these reactors, and then it's a case of it becomes a mass-produced, factory-built commodity which can be rolled out wherever you require them. Now, when it comes to renewable energies, the interesting thing about this is it's separated. If you look at the bottom left diagram, what we have is the adjacent plants. So the reactor we have standalone approved there, but then we can connect anything we want to the reactor. Typically, if it's electricity, and we use generally the technology which is used in concentrated solar plants. So we have the molten salt, which creates steam, which drives a turbine. So it's well-known and well-used technology that we move forward with there. But we can use it for heating. So therefore, it's a lot more efficient, and you can do a lot of wonderful heating and other stuff. Or you can work with greenhouses, desalinization, aqua farms and other stuff. So it's got a huge potential, incredibly cheap and incredibly well to work with. So why am I required to work with this amazing technology? So obviously the idea is to roll out many of these, many tens to hundreds to thousands if possible. And they all need monitoring, controlling, managing with all the data and everything else, which means we need to move towards automation, high-speed data flow, digital twins, data analytics, and the like to make it work. So the next slide is showing you a kind of a brief overview of what we're playing with and what the drivers are. So on the left, we're a global workforce. So therefore, we need to have a digital economy and a digital workforce to work together all over the world. So we've got employees in Korea, London, South Africa, Canada, America, and other places. So therefore, that works as well. We're doing a lot of R&D and design work. So we're experimenting and looking at what are the best technologies and how they're going to employ that. But the amount of data we're going to move is massive. I mean, if you consider it, we're looking at how the neutrons within the atoms flow and what they do and how they perform over a 20-year period. Huge amount of data. We need to be able to do this remotely. We need to deal with knowledge retention. This is an incredibly difficult area, and not many people know this. And we're not going to generate enough engineers who know how to do this fast enough. So we have to automate a lot of stuff with digitization. One of the aspects which I found challenging, and I think my team do, is getting our engineers to work together with our software developers who work within the digital industry. So we're going from a highly constrained, managed industry where everything is, project managed by the rules requirements, working with an agile team who are used to agile development and working in a horizontal structure and making decisions. So it's a very different way of working. So getting these to meld and work together has been quite a challenge. The generational gap. I don't know how many people have come across a generational gap, but I find the different generations and how they're approaching this and how they're looking at it is quite different, and we have to adjust and allow for this. So, to go through some of the technologies we're working with here, one of the big areas, and I believe it's been presented to a certain degree here, is digital twins. This is quite a difficult area and it's quite complex. It's quite a bit harder than one would tend to expect, because the ability to get the data and move it into digital twin to visualize it is quite complex. You would use CAD drawings, for example, and you would think that based on the marketing, you can get your CAD drawings, import them into your digital twins, and you can visualize it. Where in fact, the hierarchies and the meshing and how these are constructed are quite different. And it takes an awful lot of effort, and we're working quite hard to work out ways around this, and it's looking to be quite a complex task that we're not too sure how we're going to progress, see whether we have to manually build instead. And this is tying into simulation, and the simulation is requiring us to work with massive amounts of data from lots of different data stores in different areas, and the integration of that data and making sure the data is the right data set to work with is very challenging, because most systems are not designed to work so well that way. So, and then the other thing is mainly here is the virtualization, moving to the cloud environment. So moving to cloud environment is exciting because it allows you to go to an OpEx model, it allows you to scale massively, enables you to spin up servers and solutions very fast and work with them. But on the downside, it's very complex, it's very technical, the learning curve has been extremely high, and we find there are a lot of restrictions in how you can use a technology which you would not expect. So, we can talk a lot about this for a long time, but I shall move on. So a lot of what we're talking about with this digital workplace and everything else related to it is the fourth industrial revolution and the driving of the fourth industrial revolution. So based on what we're having with the World Economic Forum, it's a case of here, we're saying my apologies, we're saying here that it's about who evolves the fastest, not who's the biggest. So therefore, we've seen the likes of Uber coming along, and they've come up with a whole different way of working, and they've moved there fast, and they've made a huge difference. During this COVID epidemic, we found that those companies that have gone online and have been able to provide that service online to provide you the service you need have grown and flourished a lot better than those who didn't. But the interesting thing is that this is talking about the integration and the fusing the physical, digital, and biological world, which is pretty massive. And as you see, we're only just starting on the journey. And we're getting people already talking about the 5th industrial revolution, which is, to me, quite interesting. So a lot of things we have to think about, and I did some work advising for the United Nations as well for a while. And we're talking about ethics and identity. So a lot of what we're looking at is about the ethics behind what we're doing here with machine learning and artificial intelligence, and also how we actually make the digital technology available moving forward. So this is a huge amount of technologies and a huge amount of things to consider. But all of these are pretty critical to think about moving forward. And I think it's a whole massive session on its own. So I said I'd talk a little bit about, what are the drivers moving forward. So we've been in the 4th industrial revolution for 10 years or so, I'd say. I've been working in digitizing and doing digital transformation for maybe as long as 20 years ago. I've been doing a lot of work in this space, a lot of mobility, a lot of moving forward, a lot of guiding. And a lot of that is based on the technologies improving, it's moving forward, and we're getting there. But we're accelerating that a lot because of the COVID epidemic, which is forcing us to accelerate our use of these technologies. But also we're finding that based on these global goals we have got identified here, this is speaking a lot to what is driving us and how we need to think about moving forward with how we're using the digital technologies, which smart cities, obviously sustainable cities and communities, is critical. We have to be able to see how we can employ and use that. And that ties in with your renewable energy. The renewable energy is extremely challenging in itself, and I could talk lengthily about that and how we work. But it's the case of the renewable energy. Some renewable energy is probably less helpful to the environment than we believed, like biomass and other technologies of those sort. But we also find that when you're using solar and wind-powered energy, it's very great as a peaking load and very good for layering the energy on top of what you require. But you need your base load to keep the sustainability so that you have inertia in the grid so that the power keeps flowing. So I did an analysis for one of the islands off the African coast recently on how they can transform and become a digital player globally and become a gateway nation. And one of the things which was in their favor, which I noticed against the rest of, say, the African continent, is they actually have electricity. So one of the important things about the digital workspace is having electricity, which may seem a crazy thing to say, I must admit. But when you've got I'll talk about Pretoria here as an example. Last week, for over a week, we had no electricity because our substation blew up because it hadn't been maintained. Now, this is not really very good for business. It's not good for working, and we found a lot of our people moved to a different part of the country so we could just carry on working. So in a lot of parts of the world, we need to look at how the sustainability in electricity works. So onto that with the digital technology, and I came across this morning as it happened, reading through one of my engineering journals, and it's talking about the digital twin Earth, which to me is like a fantastic concept, which all of us are working with digital technologies and moving forward, is to look at how we can enhance and use this information, provide information to it, to understand our impact on the world and how we can react to it and how we can deal with it, whether it's about how we can provide better services if we're a charity or a government, or if we're like a private enterprise, how we can, provide better ways to market our services there to make a huge difference and make things better. And an area which I really enjoy, quantum computing, and it's an area where quantum computing really can get moving and start making a lot of working calculations for us and start making a huge difference. So this is pretty much maybe the ultimate digital twin, and I think it's very exciting. So in our workplace, we've started looking at how we can work there. So one of the things, and I must admit, I initially found it quite challenging to get into the mood of it, is the agile sprints. But in the digital workplace and the current technology, we have to move to an agile way of working. Following the old waterfall-based project management approach and monolithic projects and spending 2 years delivering a technology is just not going to work anymore, because by the time you finish the project, everything's out of date and your company or your competition has raced ahead of you, and you've lost out and you've got no business. So you need to do agile sprints to be innovative and to be able to move fast and keep up with the competition, which comes down then to digital dexterity. In this case of how fast can your workforce be able to adjust and work with this changing technology, because it's going to change fast and you've got to work fast and learn new things. It's generally far too much for anybody to learn if you send them on courses or trying to give them something to look at. So you need to almost go for micro training and micro short courses and online work and keep them spending a little bit of time every day or every week, learning and seeing how they can keep up with it, and not to get overloaded or bogged down with the technology, because it is truly overwhelming, and a lot of people do struggle with it. Another concept is design thinking. It's very different because everybody's used to having the same processes, the same systems, the same way of working. And now it's a case of everybody has to start thinking constantly about how digitization solutions can improve their work, make it more efficient, and make them more flexible and available. So that is a whole different way of thinking, and it's a change management exercise to work with everybody. Automation of routine work. We accelerated this recently because we had one of our data scientists who spent all week trying to push through a procurement for a contractor. It was crazy. You can work out the formulas, bounce backwards and forwards, and now in this week we use low code to automate this, and now we can do it in probably about an hour. So you can do this fairly quick and create this stuff, but it makes a huge difference and saves you expensive resources being tied up and getting disillusioned. And you want the flexibility of getting on-demand workforce, because a lot of these skills are not available very much, very expensive, and you want to be able to get them at short notice, use what you need, and let them move on elsewhere. So what are the challenges? These are pretty important to look at. We've got the metrics. How do we measure and how do we know that what we're doing is making a difference, it's improving? I'm going to talk about this some more next. But we have culture shock. Moving to this digital world is a huge culture shock. It's very hard to work with the different technologies, the speed of their working. A lot of the workforce may not even have IT experience or knowledge, and may only just about be able to use Microsoft Word and email. So it's important to help them along with that, because it's not easy. And, whatever anybody says, it is truly not easy to keep up and get to grips with this. Burnout. You tend to have your high performers and your high flyers, and they tend to work so hard that you're at home and you're digital and they don't turn their machines off, and next thing you know, they're working 20 hours a day because they're looking at the next email, because you've got a global company and you're getting emails all the time, you're getting work all the time, they're responding and working all the time. Next thing you know, they're burnt out. It's happening with great frequency. It's a serious problem. Talent deficiency. A lot of this is new solutions and new technologies that we're working with, and the workforce hasn't caught up with what we require. Machine learning is extremely advanced statistical mathematics. It's very complex and difficult, and you need to be very attuned in that way of thinking to be able to do that kind of work. Data scientist as well is also be able to understand deeply, and a lot of experience of data in your area or your industry, but be able to do the calculations and analytics related to it. It's a unique skill, and they need to be nurtured, and we have to work forward to find these people. Silos. Now, I've come across silos quite a lot. It's a case of different departments and different areas don't necessarily want to work with each other. They don't want to share the way they do business and how their governance works, or how they communicate. In our current area, we've got us on the software side, and we have what we think is important, what we require. Whereas the engineers have a whole different viewpoint, and the information sharing and what we're asking each other, there's a missing communication there sometimes, because what we think is important, they don't, or vice versa, and the information doesn't come through. So it takes quite a lot to get over that. Business processes. You have to do a huge change in your business processes. This can be a huge turmoil for the organization. It's changing your roles and responsibilities. You get an uncomfortable workforce. If unions are involved, they can start complaining because people don't like change. It's a very delicate process, but it's important as required. Management structure. You've got to move away from your top-down hierarchical structure to a more horizontal structure, so that the workforce is empowered. The management is more of a guide and a coach rather than giving you instructions on what to do. And you have to be self-driven and a self-starter. And the big one, which I guess we're all talking about, is security and cybersecurity and how we work there. I'm not necessarily going to talk about it too much now, because that is a whole topic on itself, and it's basically a case of being aware and safe and being careful in a digital workplace, and hopefully everybody's got training programs to address and work with this. So if we're talking about metrics, whenever we're doing the business or moving forward, you have simple business metrics which are designed at a strategic level by the organization. And simple ones that we look at is revenue generation. You want to increase your revenue generation of your money, make more money, make the shareholders happy. Cost reduction is another way to improve the business, create greater efficiencies, create less capital spend, or make a better staffing, or reduce your staffing and other aspects. So that is important to measure. Improvements to customer satisfaction. So that is important. So therefore you improve your customer satisfaction, which you can measure, and then you get more business, which then by accounts improves your revenue generation. Employee attraction. You want to employ the best staff and retain them. You want the best staff these days because of what the digital workplace involves. It's necessary to make sure that you have this workforce on hand and happy to work. The reputation of the organization is important. Now with social media and the speed that information can travel, it's very easy for your reputation of the organization to be rapidly damaged, and it cause you a serious loss of revenue. It's really quite important to manage that and control that and keep that on board. So managing that area is very important. And then we got, say, for example, if you're looking at more physical reduction in safety incidents. So even the digital workplace relates to unsafe environments as well to measure. So potential metrics which you can use to help work with those things. If you're looking at the people side, you can look at employee resignations compared to what you have. How much internal recruitment do you manage to get employees to stay on and get promoted? How many people are doing their training and developing and getting new skills? How are they growing in their roles? In employee engagement, you should have your online forums, your online wikis and other stuff. And it's like, how many of the employees are going on there sharing information, having the discussions in groups to actually share knowledge and improve together, doing new projects and everything else. It's a pretty good indicator of where the energy is going and how that's tying into where the money generation is. So then you want to look at your cost savings. So you want to look at IT costs. Now, IT costs moving towards a digital workplace is it's going to be very hard to reduce those costs by the very nature of the activity, but you can start optimizing those costs based on a balance between using the online technology and moving away from on-premise. There's a huge shift towards online technologies these days, but you have to be careful of how you use it, because you can suddenly find that your costs are excessive and you're not expecting what you're coming down the line from your use. So therefore, this has to be managed carefully. And then we can look at training and travel costs. So I think it's been seen hugely during this period that travel costs have been massively reduced. But despite what everybody says about this new way of working, where we're online, we're working from home, we don't need to travel, we're humans, we like physical contact, we like working together. So I don't somehow see myself that it can ever be removed. I mean, tomorrow, I'm an executive working at these levels, and I'm getting excited tomorrow because I'm going to go help one of my workforce to install servers and configure them and build them with an OpenStack cloud environment for testing. And I'm doing that just because I want to get out and actually spend some time with someone and actually do something interesting. So it's still there, and I think we're going to find that energy and that excitement moving on. So a thing to look at, and it's where I've seen as a big challenge, and I've seen it fall down quite a lot in the digital workplaces and other places I've worked. And these are very difficult. These are very difficult things we're talking about here. Is you need to have clear team objectives and alignment. The team needs to be critically clear on what they need to do, what decision making they can do, the flexibility they have, and how they can go about going and achieving them. This is critical. And even I had discussions with my team today where there was not quite enough clarity, and the management didn't know quite how to give them that clarity. So we're now putting together workshops to address that. You have to work at it all the time. You can't let it slip. You can't think, I told them at the beginning of the year and think it will stick. Things change. The next, and it's something which I found extensively untrue, is the way things work, is measuring productivity against time. And that ties in with the following one, which is identify important metrics. So in companies I work with, you see people who work 12, 18-hour days, and they're working long days, and they're getting huge amounts of praise, and they're getting recognition and bonuses, and they're asking all their emails and doing all this stuff, but they don't actually do anything. They're just keeping busy doing nothing. Or they're taking 10 times longer to do a job which you can do yourself. So I find I could do a job in 4 hours, so I work 8 hours and leave, but they can do the same job in 2 days, but they're doing the overtime and they get more recognition based on how things are measured. This is not exactly the best way to proceed or progress. And this has caused a lot of frustration with myself in his workplaces. And also to identify that you need to have a relaxed mind, a fresh mind, and a happy workforce to be able to effectively work. So you tire your brain out, you're not going to work very well. And we have to trust the workforce. It's important to gain that trust. So then we walk about data. Data is the single most important thing in this digital currency we're working about, or this digital world we're working with. We have to make sure we have the right data to work with, know how to work with it, and how to deal with it. But there's no point getting all the data in the world, because you're going to have sprawl. If you have sprawl of data, which means you have so much data, what are you going to do with that data? It's like, to analyze it is going to be huge. How clean is that data? How many different sources is that data? What is the value of that data? It's a need to actually collect the data requirement. I was working with one utility about quite a number of So a lot of what we need to work with then is, hopefully you're reading me now, a lot of that is working with the quality of the data. Bad data coming in is going to affect you. So machine learning, it's a case of going to learn with your data. If your data is skew or bad or is not fully correct or clean, you're going to come up with bad results, bad information, and skew. So that is quite important. And I can give quite a lot of examples where that's been a huge problem. We've got to deal with the confidentiality of the data as well. So I will hopefully wrap up here with my connection. So we have to, when we're working with this, and I found that we have to look very closely at our business architecture. And the business architecture is important to make sure that we can actually deal with the digital workplace. The technology selection is important. You can't choose the first technology you come across. Resourcing is incredibly key. And then we deal with our the data needs for the organization. So hopefully this is getting through, and because of the connection challenges.
Steve, yes, you're coming through well now.
Yeah, I don't know how long I was out for, but Africa there for you.
We just missed your audio there momentarily towards the end. It was just the one slide before this one, your audio was broken out.
Yeah, I apologize. My screen went crazy and I had huge messages, very confusing. I wasn't sure how much I was coming across, so apologies there for my confusion on the presentation. It was quite difficult, but it's the joy of living in Africa.
I think that your message came across well, and that did not affect the flow. So that was very good. And what I like about it is that you are, you're broadcasting, of course, directly from Pretoria, in South Africa. And we are here, of course, with a global community participating in this conference, and I had some time in Johannesburg in South Africa where we're having rolling blackouts because of energy issues that were happening in that area. And you probably can talk a lot more about that, especially being in the energy industry. And that's the first question that I have for you. How do you see the digital transformation impact on your industry? And I will say more broadly, the energy industry, but this very small, very interesting work you're doing with small nuclear reactors here. How is digital transformation impacting your work directly?
So I've been doing a lot of work for a long time on smart grids. I even have worked with some of the larger utilities on how they're developing and building a smart grid and putting their technologies together using IoT. And I've been advising some African countries even this year on how to approach revenue collection, how to manage and monitor their energy. So the big impact coming along, which is outside of Africa, I think, is electric vehicles. That's a huge impact. How's a grid going to sustain that? The renewable energies, we're moving away from grids which need centralized energy management from huge, large power stations to a lot smaller power energy generation closer to the use, which means we can generate a lot less. Because, for example, in South Africa, we have to generate 3 times the amount of energy than what we use because of the amount of energy lost in transmission. So we can actually generate a lot less, which is better for the country, but we need to have a lot more automation and management of the grid to make it stable. Otherwise, we're going to find all our devices blowing. It's an exciting area.
For sure, and as you mentioned, as we have more and more distributed sources of power, the integration of that in not only in this traditional grid, but in smart grids becomes increasingly important. Tell us a little bit more about the ultra safety Nuclear Company,
Ultrasafe
which is
Nuclear.
an awesome, by the way, name, because you're gonna say right off the bat on the name of the company, this is ultra safe, because a lot of people have unfortunately misguided perceptions about the nuclear industry. They think about Fukushima, they think about, you know, 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl, and they don't realize how safe nuclear power plants really are. And I assume that you're doing something even at the next level that it's ultra safe. Tell us a little bit more about that project and what
Yeah.
that looks like.
So apart from the fact it's nuclear reactions, the technology and the approach is extremely different. So your traditional nuclear reactors are huge. They're basically uranium sitting inside your graphite reactor, and it's cooled by water or heavy water. So it's a big, huge thing cooled by that. You're pumping in water to cool it all the time. The reactors we're looking at is like a lot smaller in energy production, but the sort of reactor we're building is known as a high temperature gas cooled reactor, which is using helium. So helium is like a lot safer, and it allows for better cooling. But the amazing thing is this reactor is so safe that if you lose the helium disappears, you lose the cooling, you lose the controls, you lose anything. The heat will dissipate through the earth around it. So it gets cooled by the ground and it gets cooled. The amazing thing is that if the reaction gets too hot, the neutrons, if I may talk about them, the neutrons which cause the splitting of the atoms, they go too fast and they actually have too much energy and they actually start missing all the other uranium-235 atoms, and therefore it starts cooling because you've got less reaction. Then it starts cooling and cooling until it's cool enough to actually start binding them again. And then the reaction starts up again. So then it's kind of like a gentle wave all the time. So it's pretty much impossible to have a meltdown or other situation, and it's pretty amazing. And it's a proven technology for 30 or 40 years, and now it's coming online to be produced because now costs of that and technology is getting there to do it.
What type of lifetime you have for a small unit like that?
So the one we're building is designed for 20 years. But the thing is, we say it's 20 years because if you're putting in a turbine lasts 20 years, a generator lasts 20 years, you know, your diesel generator. So all the other stuff you would need is about 20 years. So we're figuring if you need to take those out and replace them, you know, you can take out the reactor as well and put it in the back of a lorry and take it away. The thing is, it's designed such that when at the end of 20 years, you can take it all away, fill in the hole, and you can start farming. So, or if you want, you can just get another reactor on the back of a lorry, wheel it in, dump it in, and off you go again. It's pretty flexible, amazing from that. We're looking in one country to put in 100 of these side by side to create a big, huge, powerful one, which is quite amazing. So it's and the fact that we can not touch for 20 years, and we need almost no manpower to maintain it or monitor it, makes it incredibly useful.
This is a great example of you know, technologies that have existed for a period of time, and then they have a resurgence for a number of different reasons and technical improvements and opportunities that happen. Is it at a production scale now that the small reactors are happening at a production scale, or not yet?
So we're not at production scale because there are quite a number of companies out there, the same as us, developing these reactors, and all of them are like have a different purpose. Like you have an off-road car and a racing car, they are similar, but they do different things. So there are quite a few companies out there which you might have heard of, like TerraPower and Rolls-Royce. They're building similar for a different purpose. But with this digital technology and this fourth industrial revolution and the way we're working, it's such a huge innovative leap and a huge jump forward. It's taking a lot of time for the industry to shift from the ultra safe thinking of how to not have the accidents like Chernobyl and Fukushima and that, and to actually allow us to use our technologies to build what we're going to build. So a lot of what we're doing is having to demonstrate that. So one of the things I'm doing is building almost like one of the first of a kind full engineering simulation of an entire reaction and doing the full digital model simulated. This is incredibly complicated and difficult. And I think that quite a lot of us in the industry are trying to work on the same problem, not just us, so that we can actually prove that it's safe and we can leave these things alone. So we're pretty much going to start putting these things in within the next year or two. And then with these trials, hopefully they're happening and we'll start seeing them rolling out a lot more within 2 or 3 years.
Very interesting. And now if I think about, and you already discussed some of this, the digital technologies and impact on this type of business model in the energy industry, small nuclear reactor, maybe distributed energy, some potential installations in remote locations. What are some of the most useful digital technologies that you may be using here? I can see some level of remote monitoring and for security and performance and maybe artificial intelligence and some of those things. But I'm curious about what's actually happening. What are some of the technologies that you feel right now are ready? It's not hype, but it's really ready for adding value to this type of business model.
So one of the technologies which I really like that we're making a lot of use of now is containerization in the cloud. So going online and using the containers, and I don't know if I need to talk about containers much, and the ability to work with Kubernetes and other message systems to actually get high-speed transmission of data. And it allows us to do our calculations where we can spin up in a matter of seconds 1,000 servers and start doing calculations for us, and they're identical, and we can like rip them back down again in a high-performance computing cluster and other stuff. So we're still experimenting with it, but it's like the cost and effort to build ourselves a data center and to build that in, or to go and use a supercomputer is horrendous. But this releases us from all of that and allows us to actually suddenly do this easily. It's fantastic.
You know, that's great. If you go by the saying that necessity is the mother of invention, I think the African continent has many great examples where you have used latest technologies to really leapfrog, you know, the stages of development, right? You can talk about telecommunications and how that happened, and I think you're providing some interesting examples here on how that may be happening to a certain extent on this business segment.
Yeah, because we got some of the best designers of nuclear reactors in this country. So we're pretty lucky to have them here, and I feel humbled and blessed to have the opportunity to work with these amazing people. It's like truly an honor for me, and it's truly exciting, and I'm getting to learn an awful lot. It's an excitement I never expected after working for Huawei, which I thought I'd reach the top of my career. This is fun.
That's fantastic. Steve, thank you so much for your leadership. I mean, you have global cross-industry experiences that are so relevant to this discussion on digital transformation. Thank you so much for your presentation, for sharing your expertise with our global audience today. And we're very much better off by learning these perspectives that you have shared with us.
And thank you for allowing me to present and put forward my experiences.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Steve Epps, again, Chief Advisor in Digital Transformation for USNC, directly from Pretoria in South Africa, sharing his expertise on a very interesting area of energy and small nuclear reactors and the ability that they to scale the digital technologies in that market segment. Now, this concludes day 2 of Digital Workplace Transformation Live. We had a little bit of digital twins to start the day, and we talk about robotics process automation. We had Teva Pharmaceuticals giving kind of the biopharma view of digital transformation, and we wrap up with small nuclear reactors in South Africa. What about that, huh? A true global coverage of all of the richness of digital transformations that are taking place today around the world. Now, for tomorrow, I want to give you a bit of a preview of what we're going to have. We're going to start with an expert in process risk analysis. He comes from Silver Mist, and he's going to talk about process risk analysis as a framework for starting a meaningful digital transformation. After his session, we're going to welcome Hao Din, who is the Director of Digital Transformation for Electrolux, and he's going to talk about the human side of transformation. I mean, we are going to have dislocations caused by technology here. We look at the presentation from UiPath on RPA, and there's tremendous value that's created, but there's a need for upskilling and reskilling of professionals whose jobs will be automated. And Hao Din is going to talk about the human side of digital transformation, and how some organizations like Electrolux are building the human side and making human capital a priority as they go digital and transform their businesses. That will be followed up by the Chief Digital and Innovation Officer from the city of Westminster in the UK. And this is Aruj Haider, who is going to be with us, and her session will be future-proofing your workplace, and is going to provide a bit of this public, view of, and when I mean public, I mean communities, public, the city's view of this hybrid workforce that we're having, the digital transformations that are taking place in cities, and she's going to share her expertise directly with us. And then we're going to have a tremendous session with the Senior Director of Operation Solutions for Jabil, who is a large manufacturer, and he's going to talk about the customer experience in the digital remote workplace. I mean, Jabil has factories all over the world, not just factories, but operations and back office operations all over the world, and serving customers in multiple market segments. And he's going to talk about a disciplined approach to addressing those customer needs and that customer experience by leveraging digital technologies, but also a digital remote workplace and workforce. So excited about what comes on tomorrow. Again, thank you for your engagement throughout the day today. We had some terrific questions as a result of your interactions. We appreciate that you enrich every one of the sessions with your engagement and with your insights. If you could please follow up and check our post on digital workplace transformation under my name on LinkedIn. You'll see many comments from other presenters and participants. If you have questions, you may ask those there. If you want to say thanks to our sponsors, UiPath and Quintone, for making this all happen, please do, because they appreciate hearing from you. And of course, our speakers as well like to hear your feedback on how the sessions are going and how they're adding value to you. So for now, wherever you are in the world, have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you all back here at the same channel at the same time tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day again, and be safe.